Hi, Supervisor. This is Francesca. I just wanted to let you know we are still shy on quorum. We just need one person, and we'll be able to get started. So I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
And Chair, we do have a quorum now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, let me apologize. I might be trying to switch to my computer. My computer won't start. So I am on my phone. Good thing we have many technological devices and backups. And also this is bike to work week. So I decided to bike, and I am much slower than I thought I was. So I barely made it just in my biking outfit, but a good lesson. It's fun and beautiful outside, but you got to stay fit. You can't just decide one day to get on the bike. It doesn't work that well. So in any case, good afternoon and welcome to the May 18th Regional Equitable Housing Subcommittee. For anyone joining us for the first time, thanks so much for being here. This group was formed with the purpose of forging a regional path forward to address the housing crisis that we're experiencing today in San Diego County. And as we have begun discussing in prior meetings, Senator Wesso is authoring SB 1105, which would establishing a housing finance authority for the San Diego County region. So we are continuing that discussion today and honing in on the revenue aspect of the legislation. But first up is item 1, which is non-agenda public and member comments. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Chair, I don't see any hands from the public.
Okay, great. Do we have any non-agenda member comments? Okay, seeing no hands, we will go on to item 2, which is approval of the meeting minutes from last meeting. Are there any comments, any public comments on this item?
I don't see any hands from the public.
Thank you.
Okay,
we have a motion. Is there a second?
Sotelo Solis, second.
Thank you so much. Clerk, if you could please call the roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Gloria is absent. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember LaCava.
Vote yes.
For the County of San Diego, Chair Lawson Reamer.
Yes.
For the City of La Mesa, Vice Mayor Hsu.
La Mesa, aye.
For the City of Solana Beach, Mayor Huebner.
Huebner, yes.
And for the City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you very much. And that does pass unanimously with those members present.
Okay, great. So now we are moving on to our report item for today. So as we discussed in prior meetings, Senator Wesso continues to welcome feedback and comments from our subcommittee, as well as from our larger housing task force stakeholder group. And so today we're moving on in terms of topics, and next up is revenues, which is obviously an important aspect of the legislation. So Tueri, who is SANDAG's Sustainable Communities Program Manager, and I think all of us know her well, is going to be presenting, along with Jen Lassar, a consultant to SANDAG, some of the ideas and summaries of what is currently in the legislation, as well as I know they've had a few different meetings with this large task force of about 40 stakeholders, and gathering input and ideas from them. So I'm really looking forward to what this task force has come up with, and better understanding where we're at and where we can weigh in on the legislation. So for members of the public, we will take public comments after the presentation and the board discussion. And now I'd like it to turn the floor over to Tueri and Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair. And good afternoon, committee members. So we're really pleased to be here again with you today to talk about the work that we're doing, working through and bringing forward discussion that has been taking place with our housing task force members on the Housing Finance Agency. And so I'm going to be joined here today with not supervisor, but with Jennifer Lassar, who's going to help to facilitate some of the conversation and summarize some of the feedback that we have. But I also am going to be asking one of the supervisor staff, Jeff Ewan, to join us in some of that discussion, as he's also been working closely with Senator Wayso on the bill ledge language. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this here is just a reminder to us on all of the work that we've been doing over the past month or two. And so this is, I believe, now our 4th meeting with the subcommittee here, going through a lot of the different items in your work plan, but we have also, in between all of those meetings, been meeting with the Housing Task Force. And as the chair said, we have about 40 members that, or interested parties that we have asked to participate in those task force meetings with us. We just recently met with them on Monday to discuss revenues, which we're going to talk about here with you today, as well as revisit some of the discussions that were had on the programmatic criteria. And out of all of the different attendees that we had invited, we had about 25 or so who were there, engaged in thoughtful discussion on revenues. So we're happy to be able to share some of that feedback. With the task force, we've discussed with them the programmatic criteria, the revenues, and we plan on coming back to them to have further discussion on revenues as well as governance next week after we have this meeting here today. So today we're meeting to talk about revenues, to talk about programmatic criteria, and then we hope to come back with you in early June to talk about the governance structure that's proposed in the ledge language. So with that, I'd like to now hand it over to Jeff to just give a few introductory remarks about the programmatic criteria and get us started off.
Thanks, Twary. So just wanted to do some table setting and sort of set the stage for the conversation about revenues and remind ourselves the journey we've been on. So as a reminder, this is about the deep housing affordability crisis we have in the region, underproduced housing for decades. And especially when we look at low and moderate income housing, we are far below our production needs. There's a point here about regional competition, with the Bay Area creating a regional housing finance agency in 2019. They have since received $20 million from the state, and they're requesting another $20 million from the state this year. And there are no fewer than 4 additional pieces of legislation this year to create additional housing finance agencies in Southern California. You can see down there Los Angeles, Burbank, Pasadena, Glendale, San Gabriel Valley, and of course here in San Diego with SB 1105. So, there's increasing regional competition and for scarce state housing dollars that is going to be increasingly important for us as a San Diego region to be competitive for. And this last point here, the existing regional agencies don't have the mandate to necessarily take on this type of work. Next slide. So here is a reminder of kind of potential time frame of what it could look like. We have SB 1105 is moving through the state legislature and could be signed into law in the fall. Which case, if it does, then an agency will be formed and a board appointed next year by April 2023. The agency could start receiving direct allocations from the state. And as I mentioned, other regions are requesting $20 million this year, and we'll probably continue to do so. And that would fund pilot initiatives in the region. And then eventually, there could be a longer term ballot initiative approved by the voters for longer term ongoing revenue streams to support this work. Next slide. Okay, and just briefly, we've all talked about this. The agency, housing finance agency, would work to increase the supply of equitable and environmentally friendly housing by providing funding to localities and across the region, and by providing targeted technical assistance to help, support, planning and research and data and various other efforts around how to expand affordable housing, things like streamlining even. Okay, next slide. And just high level, these are some of the 6 principles that we have discussed with this subcommittee and with our housing task force. Just a reminder, it's affordability, broad needs of affordability, including missing middle, sustainability, livability, meaning access to amenities, equity, supporting good jobs for working families, and complementing existing efforts that are already happening at the local and regional scale. So those are just some of the high-level program principles to set the stage. Next slide. Okay, so the purpose today is to cover these two pieces. There was additional discussion at the task force around programmatic criteria based on some of the feedback from this subcommittee, and then there'll be discussion of revenue options. And I'll turn it back to Jennifer to discuss this first item on programmatic.
Thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to sort of walk us, actually, Jeff, Stacy, if you can go back, please. Thank you. I wanted to just walk us through how we're gonna manage the material today on the programmatic changes. I'm gonna provide just a little bit of context of where we were, the change to you verbally, the changes that how we made changes, and then I'm going to show you very specifically, where we redlined the original material based on your input. We took those red lines back to the work group, pulled them, and have input from them, and I'm going to share all that with you. And then on the revenue piece of the day, Jeff actually spent a lot of time and developed the slides. He's actually going to present the revenue, and then I'm going to share the polling results and the feedback. And then Chair Lawson-Remer, I'm going to each time turn it back to you to lead the subcommittee in the discussion, if that works for you. So just before we look at the programmatic slides, there were really two themes that came out of this group, the subcommittee, when we went through this the first time. From Mayor Sotelo Solis, there was a strong preference that revenues be shared, not 50-50 as we proposed between the regional agency and the local governments, but 70-30. And then the theme from the group as a whole was that the way we had done the budget allocations didn't leave any flexibility at all. So just to give some context, we did leave the allocations at 50-50, but we believe with the added flexibility, both at the regional level, where we basically added about 10% more flexibility, and I'll show you that, and at the local level, where we actually have 30% flexibility, we think that we can still accomplish the objectives to both provide, give the ability to provide more revenues from the regional pot to the smaller jurisdictions as needed, and giving the local jurisdictions flexibility to go actually deeper on production if that's what they want to do. So I just really wanted to acknowledge where we were. And then with that, let me dive in to the presentation. We're only showing you things where we made red lines based on your input and then took it back to the work group. So the first was on the allocation to the local jurisdictions at 50% of the overall revenue. And again, you had strong preference for more flexibility. And so we did that by reducing production and preservation and tenant protections by 10%, 5%, and 5%, bringing 30% of this pot to being flexible to be moved across items. And specifically on rental and tenant protection programs, although we left the ability for a local jurisdiction to have 5%, because there could be a very local project in which there really is need, we also acknowledge that in general, these kinds of programs are best done region-wide. So let's go to the next slide. So the stakeholder comments, really, there was one key theme from the work group, and that was they just had a concern about reducing the dollars to the production line item. And we heard it throughout the day when we shared this work with them. So you're going to see that. And yet again, there's still flexibility, but they were concerned about the minimum amount being dropped. So the polling results went from very high support in the first meeting to support that really got more down into the agreeing with reservations and neutral or abstaining. Still overall strong support, but just a lot of reservations around, again, dropping the production number. Next slide. Same thing on regional. hearing your feedback, we gave more flexibility to the regional pot, again, dropping production, the minimum for production by 10% and dropping the preservation minimum 5%, and then increasing the rental and tenant protection program 5% since we allowed the local jurisdictions to not fund that at all. And we'll go to the comment page. Again, the strong comment from the work group, and you see it reflected in the polling results, where they just had a lot of concern about reducing the production numbers and wanted a higher minimum. But again, still here, 63% in categories 1, 2, and 3, which we consider to be strong support overall. Next, please. We also, you had a lot of thoughts on affordability, wanting more funding potentially at the lowest tier, the 0 to 50%, and wanting more flexibility at the higher end on homeownership. And so we did that by increasing the amount of funding that could go to 0 to 50%. From up to 40% to up to 45%. You see that in red. And then 2 bands down on the homeownership program, a concern that we might want to be able to go to 135%. So we added that in, but still with homeownership programs not to exceed an average of 120% overall. So it just means that the tier of homeownership affordability can be larger in range, but still not exceed 120%. And then the other thing that we added that came up in the conversation was including a priority. So we had just general priorities, but one kind of program pot are projects that would leverage federal and state funds. Another would be projects that are mixed income. And a third programmatic area would be facilitating development on public land. Next slide. Again, you'll see that our results, which went from very favorable in the first meeting, shifted down to sort of a stronger group, still in favor, but having more voters in the 2s and 3s range. And Stacey, if we could see the comments on that. Not surprising given the composition of our work group. There's a lot of advocates really for affordable housing production, wanting to see the bucket at 0 to 50% be bigger, and just a concern that as we raise the ability on the homeownership funds to go up, that we were doing that, trading off with lower income homes. And I'll stop there. That's really the end of the 3 areas that were had changed. Just to turn it back to you, Chairwoman, for any questions or discussion on the programmatic changes.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. That was really interesting and really helpful. I think, my view is I don't think there's one right answer. And I think we can see that in the conversation, right? Which was that there were changes made in response to initial feedback from the task force. And then once those changes were made, some people on the task force didn't like the changes and they wanted the changes back. So, which I think is like the clear thing I saw is just changes made when the task force, due to task force input, and then other people on the task force didn't like the changes. So I think overall, I think I feel comfortable with where we were. I feel comfortable with where we are now. I think both and not either or from my perspective. I think they all these again, like there's no perfect answer. It's a huge problem, but I do think we're very much in the ballpark, and I love to see that we're continuing to get sort of a vast majority of folks that are part of this really diverse task force, roughly on the same page about where we should go. And I guess I know we have a lot to do to talk about revenues. I think the one thing I would say to my colleagues is I do think I want to make sure we don't get bogged down and what's the term? Don't lose the forest for the trees. That's the words I'm looking for, where we get stuck on 5% here and 3% there and 8% there. when what we really need, I think all of the, they all move us roughly in the right direction, and would really love us to be able to, bring a recommendation to the SANDAG board to get behind the legislation, and don't want us to get too stuck on, like I said, the forest for the trees, or the trees for the forest. So those are my initial thoughts. But let me turn it to my colleagues. I see Mayor Huebner's hand.
Yeah, so this is a lot to take in, and it's been a while since the last one, so I'm still trying to digest it all. Outside of housing production, is there any reason it couldn't be 0 to that maximum percent? Because with the small cities, what if we don't have any ability to preserve anything? Like, what if there's nothing that's going out of affordability? Or, actually, it's probably not the case in our situation, but it might be in the near future when it's all kind of done. So is there a reason that we're limited in having to dip into all of these pots? Again, except for housing production, which I certainly understand. That's kind of our goal here.
Jen, do you want to answer that? I don't have an answer.
Yeah, Mayor Huebner, these are guidelines for the first 5 years, so there will be an ability to change. And on the local jurisdiction pot, it's only 10% of your funds. And I would just say, to be really technical about it, you would have the ability to actually give your preservation funds back to the regional pot, and you could probably make a swap.
Okay, so that's going to be somewhere in the legislation somewhere that there'll be that flexibility between the two pots and between the two entity groups.
When we worked on the LA one, it was the ability for cities to always opt to have the region administer your money. And so I think that's, I think that would give you, I think you would have the ability to basically give them your preservation money to manage, and you could, I think you'll be able to do that. But again, it's also only 5 years.
And would we have the ability to bank that, knowing that something might be coming in the future, and that given we're a small city, we wouldn't probably be, I'm guessing this is going to be population, or there's going to be some kind of criteria that we may not get huge amounts and it may not make much of a difference if it's a tiny amount. Could we bank it over the 5 years and then be able to make a difference?
I think I don't know, but I do think that you're just going to be able to negotiate it, asking for some more regional dollars, say for production, and giving back your preservation dollars.
Okay. I have a comment on that. So Mayor Huebner, on this piece, it doesn't say in the ledge. So I think that's the kind of thing that would be at the discretion of the SD Reef board, which I would imagine the folks here would be hopefully be right. So I think the idea is that those kinds of, there's going to be like a lot of those kinds of questions, and we can't predetermine everything. So, some of this is just it's not constrained. It's not a no or a yes. It'll be up to the board to decide.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Other comments, questions, thoughts? Councilmember Joe LaCava.
Well, this is my first meeting, so I'm even trying to go even faster up to speed than the mayor. I like this. I like a lot of what I'm hearing on the affordability. I like that it's a range. And so in terms of really customizing it to our individual city needs, and more importantly, as housing opportunities actually present themselves, I think that's where we all struggle. We're a little bit at the convenience of the private developers and which projects they bring forward. Because I assume this is partly gap financing to help projects pencil. I appreciate the mayor's comment about the housing preservation. I think that's one of the things our city has struggled with, unless it's a project coming out of a contract that we have a chance to kind of step in before it goes out to the open market. But that is something that we're very much interested in, but struggling to actually deliver, while it is an incredibly important piece of the puzzle. So I like the idea of of having the legislation have the flexibility in there, and whether it is to bank, because especially I think in terms of being able to bank it to the point where you have enough money to actually do something of substance. I think I've seen other mechanisms fail because you never generate the kind of money that you're actually able to do anything meaningful. So this is, I was briefed by my staff from the last meeting. I always get nervous when we start bumping the AMI up, but I think that's just kind of the real world that we have to face in terms of what is actually possible, what we're talking about. So generally speaking, I appreciate the leadership of the chair in terms of, I'm going to say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is a framework that seems like there's generally a support from what I heard, Jen, that you were saying from the task force. And so, more discussion, but I think you're on the right path, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Councilmember LaCava. Do I see a hand from Mayor Sotelo Solis?
Hey, Chair, thank you so much. So yes, I want to express my support. I think the way we have laid things out, and how Jennifer really encouraged those various levels. I forget what slide it was, but I'm ready. Let's do this. Let's bring some more housing. But I think this is this is going to definitely incentivize and again be both carrot and stick as we provide those opportunities. So I appreciate staff taking my thoughts in mind. And again, to me, I don't care how we split it, as long as we have the resources. I think that's the essential part. So very excited. Let's do this. I don't know if we're looking for a motion, but I don't think we are, or did
we're not quite yet.
Already have a
No, we have to, so I think the slide presentation, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen Lassar, but I think we did the update on changes from our last conversation, and now we're going to go into the revenue part of the conversation.
Yes.
Right, but okay, because I thought the revenue, the way you had split it out on what slide it was, the 50% increase, I don't know what slide it was.
We're actually not having you vote on anything like the work group.
Okay.
We're just taking your comments and reflecting them back. And then at the end, so at the end that you have your action will be to make a recommendation, Chair Lassen-Remer, I believe, to the board.
Okay.
As a totality. I believe that is your final action.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Hsu.
Hey, thank you, Jennifer, for that report, and from Jeff as well. I just want to point out some quick comments. I think it's good to know that this is going to be revisited 5 years after it's enacted, so that there's a chance to fine tune it. It's something new. There is flexibility built into the program, so I think that's another issue that's important. And I'm glad you mentioned, Jennifer, the idea that for smaller cities, you can ask the county to manage your small pot of money, because it may not be cost effective for the smaller cities to do that. So that's a lot of flexibility, and that's all important. I think the allocations are good the way it looks now. The really important thing is the allocation, which is the next section, because if you double and triple the allocation, that makes these allocations all the better. So right now, these allocations, if the allocation is small in these small pots of money, we may not be able to do much. I think the important thing is going to be the next section is making sure that we can make a difference with the allocations.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hsu. Mayor Sotelo Solis, is your hand still up, or is that left from your last comment?
From my last comment, sorry, Chair.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much to Tueri and Jen and the team. It sounds like you had a really robust task force conversation with a lot of input, and I just feel so grateful that we have so many stakeholders focused on this issue because it's really a crisis for our region. So, and just thank you all for the really great work to bring this forward so far. So if I can, I will hand it back to you to take us through revenues.
Let me just say to close out the programmatic part, again, the red lines were the areas that you did provide the inputs. I just want to confirm that. And Mayor Huebner, I just on your point, I think we also know, right, that projects come, 1 year, you don't do a preservation project every year. So we'll have to find a way to look, as you said, look at that pot over multi-years. So I do think we will be able to at the programmatic level, when we execute, accommodate all of that. So just wanted to acknowledge that projects don't come every year, and absolutely, you're not going to have 5 years of preservation projects. So we'll figure that out.
Great, thank you.
Joe, Council Member Hava, did you have a comment before? Okay.
Yeah, my apology. You just said something that kind of triggered. This is my first meeting in person, so I apologize. On the programmatic, I mean, you all probably went through this, but the strategic priorities, innovation, and the research and policy development, that's 20% of the budget. You put 10% administration, and so you're taking a pretty good chunk out of this revenue stream. It sounds like the task force was okay with that.
Yes, we didn't really get comments on that at all. And the strategic priorities and innovation really give you the flex. I mean, I think 10% it is a conservative number on admin. I mean, that actually creates the discipline.
Yeah.
And by the way, that goes to the localities as well to administer. But on the strategic priorities and innovation, that really gives you all a lot of flexibility. This group has expressed some interest in understanding where the modular business is at, but you'll have the ability to move that around every year as you see fit to adapt to the times.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes. So just to again sort of share how we're going to run this section, and there are 10 revenue items. I want you to know that with 8 being in the legislation and 2 not. Those are the last 2, and you'll see the list in a minute. They're also the easiest ones, frankly, for our discussion. So in terms of managing our time, I just want you to know the first 8 are going to take a little longer potentially. And Jeff will share the content of those. I will provide a summary of the feedback and the polling results, and then I'll hand it each time back to the chair to lead your discussion. So Jeff and I tag teamed like this in the work group, and it worked very well. So Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Next slide. Great. So subcommittee members wanted to start off as we start talking about revenue to just have some framing principles before we get into all the specifics. And the first one is shared burden, shared responsibility. And this was echoed in some of the other regions when they developed their regional housing finance concepts in the Bay Area and LA. They also started with this notion that housing as a sector, our affordable housing challenges affects everybody in the region, not just one specific sector, not just one specific geography. So just as a framing principle, wanting to develop a number of revenue options that can target, all sectors. So property owners and developers and employers, employees, local government. It's really a shared responsibility for us to collectively tackle. So that's kind of one framing principle. Another framing principle is this toolkit of options approach. Just as a reminder, what SB 1105 really is enabling legislation that will go up to Sacramento and say, here's authority to create this thing, this regional housing finance agency. And what we want to put in the legislation is a toolkit of potential revenue options, just to allow for the flexibility at a later date and allow voters at a later date, the opportunity to consider different options. So that's really what this whole conversation this next hour is going to be about. What are the toolkit of options that we're going to even allow this authority to entertain? And we really need to bake it into the authorizing legislation itself. And which is the same approach that happened up in the Bay Area and other places when they created their enabling legislation. So that's a super key principle here. Like we are talking about having a diversity and just trying to maximize flexibility and options for a later date. A third key principle is voter approval. All of the revenue measures, all of the sort of tax revenue measures, we'll say, will require voter approval at a later date with a ballot measure. So again, this is about creating opportunities, creating the options, and voters are going to opine, at a later date. And the specifics would need to be developed at a later date before any ballot measure got brought forward. At this point, it's just conceptually, what are the tools we want to put in the toolbox? Okay, and with that, that's my preamble. And here is the menu. And I will go item by item. And as Jennifer mentioned, the first 8, really the first 7 are a little bit more in depth. And then the last 3 or 4 will probably be a little bit quicker. But we'll get started right away with a big one, an exciting one, which is the documentary transfer tax. And let's go to the next slide on that. So I'll provide just a little background on the documentary transfer tax. So this is a fee that is assessed at the time of property sale. So a property seller, say you're selling a home, the seller would pay this transfer tax. It exists right now all across the state. And in San Diego County, across all 18 cities in unincorporated, it is set at $1.10 per $1,000 of property value. So as an example, I have here a $700,000 home would net out $770 in documentary transfer tax. That's today. That's what happens today. A number of jurisdictions have been moving towards a more progressively tiered approach to say, well, high value properties and sort of luxury properties should maybe be subject to a different rate, a more progressively tiered rate. And then typically, when cities have moved to do that, they've carved out specific exemptions for affordable housing and supportive housing and workforce housing and transfers between family members and things like that. So just as an example, like the city of Santa Monica, they set their threshold at $5 million. So properties at above $5 million have a higher transfer tax rate, and properties below $5 million have a lower transfer tax rate. And as another example, the city of LA, they have a ballot measure that they're working this year. And they set their threshold at 5 million and 10 million. I read their analysis. They found that 97% of properties would actually be exempt from those when you set those thresholds at those ranges. And it could generate pretty significant revenue over the next 10 years to support affordable housing. Again, we're not going to get into any of the specifics in the legislation. This is about the concept of a documentary transfer tax. And one more slide on this. Just to add a little wrinkle, there's 2 flavors, if you will, of how you could execute this. You could the kind of traditional approach is based on the sales price of property. So it's a $700,000 property. It gets taxed at a certain rate off that. And an alternative approach, which we're doing some research to see, there are some areas that are starting to do this. They tax it not on the price of the property, but on the value of the land. And the idea is that the buildings, maybe builders or homeowners are putting lots of investments in building up those properties. We don't want to necessarily disincentivize that or discourage that. But if you have properties that the land, just the value of the land is appreciating, 2x, 3x, 5x, over a 3-year period or a 5-year period, that might be handled differently. And again, we're not getting into the specifics of how you would set those rates, but I'm just noting here that there's some flavors that could be pursued. And with that, I'll hand it back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Jeff. I think in general, just to give you the general flavor of the work group meeting, we anytime and Councilmember LaCava, since you are new, let me just take a minute to explain gradients of agreement. It's basically think of it like as a stoplight with 2 greens and 2 reds, right? So it's dark green, light green, yellow, light red, dark red, and anything 4 and up is considered really an approval. But what we're watching for, and it's just a way of sharing right in at a more nuanced level than yes or no. What we're watching for in a group is to see if we start to have stronger 4s and 5s. And so we asked the work group members every time that they voted with a 4 or 5 to either share those comments in the chat openly or share them privately in the chat to Stacy. And I can tell you that almost nobody took us up on that. Only one comment came related to business taxes. So what we saw, and you're going to see here, is definitely some ideological feelings being expressed generally around taxes and fees, but nobody weighed in with specifics. So here, the polling results were basically 88% at strongly agree and agree with reservations. And the comments that we received, Stacy, and again, we were just getting started. It's good to have a lot of options. And the work group was struggling with how much detail went into these or not. And as Jeff can share with you, it's very little detail. Jeff's amount of detail is more at the educational level to all of us. It's not the depth that's in the legislation. And I'll stop, Mayor Huebner.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize if my question is a little meandering because I don't have time to formulate it. I'm trying to take it all into, but so this is, I get this. So the second one is a little bit like land value recapture, I'm gathering, which I think is great. But the question is sort of, so obviously many, the higher land value cities will be contributing in this manner more. And many of the high land value cities are smaller cities. So the amount of money that goes back to those cities is kind of a concern to me. And I get the shared responsibility bit about it, but I can just hear that, from constituents. And also, given that most of our RENA numbers, a good, 2/3 are very low, low, and moderate, yet we have these really super high land values. We definitely need more money in order to fulfill our obligations. So just putting that out there as a concern, and because we still haven't gotten to a couple sort of the questions of like, is every city going to get this, or do you just ask, you apply for it? And so how does this all work? So I'm still kind of confused about all of the mechanics of the way this is being proposed.
Let me take a stab at that, and then Chairwoman or Jeff, please follow me. One, it's by formula, by RENA numbers, so it's formulaic. Every jurisdiction is entitled to it, and then each jurisdiction can pick whether they want to literally administer it themselves or have the county administer it. And to your very specific comment, and I hear you. And again, this is only a menu of options, right? We hope to put all the options in the legislation, and then they come back, provide the legislation signed by the governor. Every single one of these options would come back to the voters, and we would be able to do a lot more exhaustive analysis. But intuitively, you're correct that a Solana Beach, Del Mar, whether it's just a straight tax or a land value, is going to have a higher amount per home, although you're a smaller population, and you're also going to have a higher probably subsidy per unit, right, than a jurisdiction that's, and I think those are just the facts. And so hopefully that will wash out, right? Higher in and higher out on a per unit basis. But again, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to share regionally and to also look. Solana Beach is going to do 1 or 2 projects every 5 years, right? Del Mar. So I think that the governance board, right, how we govern is going to also really be responsible for thinking through the equity issues. But Jeff or Chairwoman, I know Jack's up, but let me turn to you.
Sure, I have a couple of comments. So yes, my understanding is it would be formulaic, based on the formula basically on the RENA numbers, based on what folks are what jurisdictions are obligated to produce, is like, that's also what you're kind of entitled to receive as part of this, which I think is helpful, right? I mean, I think, Mayor Huebner, you and I have talked a lot about sort of the problem with RENA of it being like mandates without any money, which, is really hard in our coastal communities. And so I think I find that hopeful, the idea that there could be some resources behind these RENA numbers that currently are not, there's not really capacity, especially as you and I've talked about many times in our like higher land value areas. Like, how do we do it? So I think, so that's one thing. I just want to comment on something on the slide specifically about like flavor 2 on the land value capture approach on the documenting transfer tax. What I thought was really cool, for lack of a better word, is that correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like LA was projecting to raise $8 billion for housing with 97% of properties exempt. I'm just noting that seems pretty awesome. So. Nothing further. Just I think that was just something that popped out for me. So, any other answers?
Chair, you have Councilmember Hsu also wanting to comment.
Great, Councilmember Hsu.
Chair, I had a few quick questions. One, you showed that a few people on the committee that we surveyed were very much against this method of transfer tax. Any clue on who they are or why they are against it so much?
I would just say that the kind of the percentage of fives in general, there are meetings we have no fives, and there are items we have no fives. We've got the chamber, we've got the realtors, we've got BIA. I mean, I think we all know the constituencies that tend to be pretty anti fees and taxes. And so I can only surmise. I mean, we actually know the voters, but we don't disclose. But I think you could surmise that because it was pretty consistent in this conversation that the voters were consistent with where their organizations would fall since they represent them.
Sure, thank you.
It's problematic.
And the other, I have two kind of, and this is all getting into the details of such a transfer tax. One is the rate. When you jump from 5 to 10 million, I think that's a huge jump. And I should hope we kind of do it maybe by 1 million at a time. You graduate it so that someone doesn't want to jump from 5 to 10 million and they'll end up negotiating the cost of the property because of that. So, but in any case, I hope we can have a more gradual approach that may make more sense. You end up with the same kind of tax rate. It's just that you spread it out more than jumping by increments of 5 million. The other is there any thought of having a greater amount or tiered amount based on how much the value has gained in terms of value in the last 10 years or from the last time it was sold? In other words, if someone was to buy and sell property within a 2-3 year period, but the property value jumped by 2-3 times its whole value, it seems like there's more of a reason why they should be paying a greater amount than someone who had the property over a 15-year period, but really didn't gain that much in value. So you have another factor of time as well as the value of the property itself, whether it be land or the development.
Jeff, that's a question to you.
That's something we can definitely look at, the time factor. I understand the distinction you're getting at versus if it's a slow appreciation over 25 years versus if it's, a hot market and in 3 years it gained. We'll note it. We'll see what we can find.
And I know the realtors won't like this, but what that does is it kind of curtails these huge jumps in real estate prices. because if you do have huge prices in real estate prices, this might cap it down a little bit. You're going to get taxed a little bit more if you have these windfall gains in real estate prices. It's great if you're in the business of making money from real estate, but it's not very good if you're just trying to get into the real estate market and you save up so much money, but next year you can't buy it because it jumped so much in price. So this kind of tax that's puts time and increase as a factor in how much you're going to have this transfer tax might be a way to help address that issue. So that's just my comment. We got a long ways to go before we move on something like this as a tax measure, but hope we consider those issues.
Just want to say in response, Councilmember Shu, I completely agree with your points about, when you have stepwise functions, you get distortions, right? Like a $5 to $10 million jump. So the idea I think is to create a flexibility for voters to choose a range of approaches. And they could certainly, and I personally would certainly support something more along the lines of what you outlined, which is more gradual instead of, distortions created through huge steps. Okay, so we had Council Member LaCava's hand is up.
A nice segue from Councilmember Shu's comment. At this point, all we're trying to do is just simply include documented transfer tax as one of the options, right? And there would be no further. And it really would be a matter of presumably Sandag putting a ballot measure and deciding which one would have the most likely chance of approval by the voters, right? Or is that the case? Is that where we ultimately lead to?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. I think the idea is to just sort of kind of figure out all the different options that we would want to include with the idea that we'd want the most flexibility as possible so that down the line, either the kind of the board or a citizens initiative could look at all those options, talk to voters, figure out what voters are most likely to support, and then put together a ballot initiative that's actually, sort of most in line with where voters are at, like acknowledging that will also evolve, that where folks are at, in 2024 might be different than in 2034. And it's good to have kind of all the options on the table for people to put a ballot initiative together that makes sense for voters that people would want to support at the time.
Sounds good. I appreciate the comments of the mayor and Councilmember Shu. So thank you.
Thank you.
Essentially, we're looking at one of these things only be for homes, right? This is the one that's up on the ballot that's coming up in November.
Yeah. Good analogy, Councilmember Shu. That was beautiful. But for houses.
Right. We want houses as well as these.
Yeah. Any other comments or thoughts before we continue with, I think this is going to be long. I just am noting because I was looking at these revenue options and there's a lot of them. So yes, we should continue apace.
And, to help the pace a little, let me just share that from the stakeholders were lots of comments about thinking through, right, the impacts of all of these ideas and crafting in appropriate exemptions. So for example, crafting in exemptions, right, when military families move. So I want you to know that across all of these is a lot of opportunity after we get the legislation approved, knock on wood, to have a lot more analysis and really think through consequences and the nuanced crafting of all of these. Okay, Jeff, let's keep moving then.
All right, next slide. Okay, so parcel tax is the next option here. To add to the toolkit, parcel tax could be levied both residential and commercial parcels, and is on a per unit basis. It's collected as part of the property tax bill, but unlike the property tax, it is not based on property value. It's a flat rate per parcel. Super widespread, as many of you guys are probably aware. I found that there's over 1,700 parcel taxes in the state and over 150 in San Diego County alone. often by school districts and community facility districts. And you can administer it in lots of different ways. By square foot, by unit are probably the most common, but it could be by acre or even by street frontage. And just as comment there that the Bay Area, when they were going through their process, they explored a parcel tax as well and seeing how that might be able to generate some revenue. So as a concept, parcel tax. And turn to you, Jennifer.
Yep. Stacy, can we see the poll? Thank you. So on parcel tax, let me just share the concerns. It was a concern that parcel tax could increase the cost to homeowners, that implementation, thinking through implementation is important, and that we can create exemptions. So again, kind of a constant theme. And again, here, the majority at 3 or above, but definitely some people feeling that a parcel tax had the ability to be regressive. And because it was a flat fee, not value-based. So I think that concern about the regressive nature of this is what caused a lot of people to go more down to the 4s and 5s. And yeah, again, with that, we'll just open it up to any questions. Tara, back to you.
Questions or comments? And if folks don't have any, don't feel obligated because we have a lot of options to go through. Okay, seeing no hands, I will turn it back to our presenters.
Okay, the next one is a vacant property tax. And the idea is that vacant properties, especially nuisance or properties that say have illegal dumping, are really are not good for the housing market. It keeps supply, off the market. And it's also bad for communities. There's really nothing good that happens when properties sit vacant for long term. And so the idea is to nudge these properties to more productive uses, both from a housing production standpoint and from a neighborhood standpoint. We took a look, in the city of Oakland passed a vacant property tax in 2018, taxing both vacant land and buildings. That's important. It includes the land, unimproved land. And the idea is that those types of properties were requiring disproportionate local services to address the nuisances. They created a definition of vacancy, which would have to be done if this were to be effectuated. Numbers of various exemptions would have to be created. City of Oakland created 10 very broad ranging exemptions. And then you can see here, this is just order of magnitude, a sense of how much revenue is being generated by the City of Oakland from this effort. And next slide. I think that's it for this one. Yes, that's it.
So again, because there's nothing really regressive about this, and there's no active people in vacant property, we had very high support from the work group with 52% at 1 and 21% at 2s. And the comments here were that we should include property, which we actually did, commercial property, which we actually did. And then again, implementation is important, and different comments on exceptions and exemptions, but everybody acknowledging that exemptions are a tool to nuance these. Back to you, Chair.
I see a hand from Mayor Huebner.
Yes, is this the one that would capture second homes that are not utilized? Or is there another one on the list that's going to capture that?
I think this one could be the tool. Like the City of Oakland, they defined vacancy as a property that was in use fewer than 50 days a year. Okay. So if it was a second home or a third home that was not in use for the majority of the days, that qualified under their ballot measure. Mm-hmm. They created a registry of vacant properties, and so there's an implementation, challenge. You'd have to figure out how to effectuate that. But yeah, in the City of Oakland, second home properties would probably qualify for this.
Great, thank you.
There are questions or comments? Okay, let's continue.
Okay, the next one here is commercial linkage fee. So the idea, just high level, the concept of the commercial linkage fee is that a significant portion of our housing challenges here in San Diego is that we have a deep imbalance between jobs and housing. We've done an amazing job over the last 20 years creating jobs, high paying jobs, medium paying jobs, lower wage jobs all across the board, but we haven't supplied the housing to support those jobs. And, in planning, the jobs to housing ratio is one of the key metrics that you look at, both within a region, across a region, and within specific areas in a region. And it's really out of skew for us, the jobs to housing ratio. And a commercial linkage fee is really narrowly focused at tying those two things together. The linkage fee, which it works by saying, if you're a developer of new commercial properties, you would pay a per square foot fee based on the type of property you're going to develop. If you're going to build an office building, you may pay a certain rate of a commercial linkage fee. If it's a manufactured building, you might pay a different rate. And that money would get swept into a fund to support affordable housing that could be tied back to those employees that are working in that office building, for instance. So that there is a whole thing called a Nexus Study, which would need to get developed, that says there's a tight nexus between the commercial buildings that are being developed and the housing that needs to support them. So the city of San Diego is the only city in the region that has a commercial linkage fee. The city calls theirs a housing impact fee, and it's been around since the 1990s. It was set quite low back in the 90s. I think it was about $1 on average per square foot of commercial space. And in 2013, 2014, there was an effort to update that because it wasn't inflation adjusted, I believe. So in 2014, they actually looked to increase it, and they did a new Nexus study. And you could see here, these are the prices that the Nexus study found would be needed. It's like, say for office, you would need $72 per square foot to support the housing for the workers in that office building. The Nexus study made recommendations of what you should set the fee at, say $5.32. And then in the right column, you could see what was actually adopted by the city of San Diego by the city council in 2014. I'll give you a second to kind of absorb the table as I keep talking. I mentioned that the city of San Diego is the only city that has a commercial linkage fee. So there is an opportunity here to regionalize the approach so that there's more consistency and uniformity across the region. That was definitely part of the conversation in the Bay Area and LA, that sort of regional standards it's good to have more consistency. And also, it's in the legislation itself that a commercial linkage fee couldn't be imposed until after a voter-approved ballot measure gets passed. So this would need to be kind of this one would be a sort of a supplementary tool. And with that, I think I could turn it over to Jennifer.
We can skip through this slide, Stacy. This is what Jeff just shared. So the comments on this were definitely in favor of applying the, Stacy, I'm just going to read the comments. Stacy, go back. That the fee should be applied on a regional basis, as Jeff suggested, and that we incentivize housing, but not penalize mixed use development. And what you see here is very strong support for the commercial linkage fee, with 3/4 of the work group voting in the 1 to 3 range. And just to give you an idea, we generally have between 22 and 25 voters, and we get about 16 to 18 people that vote on each item. So a strongly disagree at 6% is probably a single voter, and a disagree at number 4 is probably 2 voters, just to give you that sense. And Chair, we'd open it up for conversation to you, or for you to lead discussion.
Okay, thank you. I think I see a hand from Councilmember LaCava.
Yeah, just real quick. I was going to say something, and then Jeff's last comment. So you said the legislation actually prevents us from being imposed as a fee. You would still have to have a vote, put it out to the voters on that. Interesting piece.
Sorry, can I clarify that point? It's actually that it could be imposed as a fee, but it could not be imposed until after one of the other revenue measures gets passed by the ballot measure first.
Interesting nuance there. Okay. Well, as you can see that we did do it, and we have a hard time getting to sell this idea at the rates that we thought were appropriate or that we could justify. But every little bit helps as well. So thank you, Jeff and Jen.
Other comments?
Okay. Let's, Jeff, you and I keep rolling.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, a business license tax is next. And again, this, you could see the flavor of these various options. They're targeting different sectors. Property owners, vacant property owners might be a different subset. Commercial linkage fees, kind of commercial property developers. And here now we're at business license tax, which is looking at employers. So the business license tax is levied on employers. Most jurisdictions have a business license tax, and there's really two flavors of how jurisdictions do it. The first is a head tax. It's just you pay a variable rate depending on how many employees you have. And the other is gross business receipts tax. So you pay a variable rate depending on your gross business receipts. And sometimes it's blended between both. And so here on the slide, I did a little sampling. The city of San Diego, it's a $34 business license tax if you're under 12 employees, and then it flips to a higher rate, 125 if you're over 12 employees, and a little bit more for each additional employee. City of Carlsbad, they do theirs flat fee, $25, and then a percentage, 40 cents per $1,000 of gross business receipts. So you could see there's kind of how these options, these flavors intermingle. And the county of San Diego doesn't have any business license tax. The concept is that a regional business license tax, again, could create more uniformity and consistency between jurisdictions. So you don't have that two sides of the street kind of condition. And I did some sampling around of other regions, and San Diego in general has lower business license taxes than many other jurisdictions across California. Here you can see San Jose, theirs starts at a baseline at $203. And Los Angeles, theirs varies depending on the type of business. But for instance, professional services was $4.24 per $1,000 of gross business receipts. And so again, this would be to add this as another tool in the toolkit. Jennifer?
Yep. And Mayor Huebner, did you want to make a comment before we go through the polling results?
Just really quickly, yes, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just be quick. And that is that, is this intended to be levied over and above what cities who have business taxes already get, so they get to keep what they're already charging, or not?
Yeah, I think it would be above, and then there would need to be some kind of credit back to employers if they're already paying something to their local jurisdiction. So Solana Beach, they already pay whatever's going to Solana Beach. But in the county, for instance, okay, in the county, there isn't one, so there wouldn't be any credit, back.
Got it. Thanks.
But again, that's conceptually how we're thinking of it, but those details would need to be developed in any later ballot measure.
So the comment that we got here, which we got privately in the chat, was that the tax could disincentivize job creation and disproportionately impact firms with California headquarters, small and mid-market companies creating middle-skilled jobs. So that was the comment that we got. And but otherwise, you can see very strong support for this measure, with 2/3 of the voters at 1, 2, and 3. And about 1/3 of the voters at the lower level of 4s and 5s. And Chair, turn it back to you.
I just want to announce I'm very excited. My computer is now working. So I'm no longer on my phone. So I feel much more present with everyone. Thank you so much for everyone's patience. Any comments on this slide? Okay, let's continue on.
Okay, this next one is the corporate investor landlord tax. And this one is really, the idea is that there's really a handful of very large, either real estate investment trusts or, hedge funds, or just very large corporate investors that have been increasingly entering the housing, the housing, both the rental market space and the single family housing space. And I think this would be a tax that would really focus on that pretty narrow subset of the landlord and housing investment population. The idea is that these very large firms drive up speculation and create market distortions in our local housing market, and tend to gobble up some of the housing stock, which is already quite constrained, making it even harder for home buyers, especially first-time home buyers, to get a foothold in the housing market. So it could be structured in a way to really focus on very large corporations. You could see some of the bullet points here. It could be targeting corporations are held by non-persons. We could create a unit threshold, say corporations that hold over 500 units in their portfolio or 1,000 units in their portfolio, or it could be based on a certain market value, a portfolio that's worth at least $10 million or something like that. And you can nuance it to have exemptions, of course, for affordable housing providers, workforce housing providers, and others. And tax rate, what did I say here? It could be based on, it could vary by portfolio size, and it could vary based on the gross receipts, rental income as well. So a lot of nuance and is possible here. And Jennifer, I'll turn it to you.
There were no comments really on this one. And you can see also extremely strong support with 72% at once. Back to you, Chair.
Yeah, I just want to say I think this is really interesting, really innovative, and I appreciate how this approach really tries to, tackle our housing crisis from multiple fronts. It's not just the revenue generation, but ensuring that, revenue is being generated, in part by increased taxes on sort of potentially the investors that might be contributing to the challenges that we face. I think that that's really promising. I do think we'd have to be, assuming that this is something voters wanted to do, there'd have to be a lot of thought put into how to design it in a way that's appropriate, that has, exemptions for affordable housing developers and providers. So I think that's all clear, but I can't imagine anyone would disagree with that. I think that's that just seems really something that I can imagine everyone getting behind. So yeah, those are my thoughts. So Mayor Huebner.
I just want to say that I think this would make the most difference of all of them so far on so many levels in our region and actually throughout the state. So this to me is, 10 stars.
10 stars for Jeff and Jen and Tueri. Good work, guys. Good work, team. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so this one is really now moving to local governments and opening up the possibility of revenue sharing into the regional pot as ways to create more efficiency. And so, cities and counties could opt to, voluntarily to pool resource into a coordinated regional approach. And here are some of the funding sources that I listed. Could be former redevelopment funds, the SB2 revenues, which are often smaller amounts, which to Mayor Huebner's point, need to get banked year over year before something substantive could be done. Could be general fund balance, or other opportunities as they come. I know it was hard. No one would have projected, ARPA dollars coming, but they did. So there could be other opportunities as well. And just a note there that, just looking to continue to work with the state to see if there's ways to explore RENA sharing credits if this approach were to be pursued. Okay, Jennifer?
Yep. As you can see, very, very strong support, 65% right at the number one. And the comments were strong support for revenue set-asides, really liking the idea of cities and county figuring out if they could opt in and share and get RENA credit. And that's something that merits some deeper understanding later on. Napa City and Napa County do it. and there's some experts that could share more with us on that. A sense that revenue sharing can help address regional inequities and constant disagreement between the cities and could require tweaks to the governance model. But I would say overall very strong support.
Thank you. I just want to comment. I think that this idea of a potential to explore sharing shared arena credits is really interesting. I think that's really worth looking at. You know, if there's sort of, you know, the ways that kind of jurisdictions could potentially pool money and also pool arena credits so that, you know, maybe jurisdictions with more money who want less houses would get less houses, and jurisdictions who want more houses and need more money could get more money and more houses. Seems like good to have that kind of flexibility. And also because it wouldn't be a mandate, it wouldn't be required, it would be totally voluntary, which I think just, you know, that kind of flexibility and local control seems like just better. Yeah. Others with questions or thoughts?
I'll jump in just real quick. I have to agree. I think the idea of getting sharing RENA credits is a very interesting idea. I always think about this is my personal opinion. This is not the official position of the city of San Diego, but the idea that when we created our smaller coastal cities, housing and the diversity of housing was not, I don't believe, one of the criteria. And so we now find ourselves where housing is now raised to a place where we're all desperately trying to figure out how we do that, how we create it. Everybody creates their fair share. But it's a very tough conversation about setting aside land. I much appreciate, Mayor, what you go through and Sanitas goes through about zoning land as a proxy for low affordable, and then a market rate builder buys it. And then you've lost that, you know, meeting that requirement. So this may be a clever way. And like you said, Supervisor, that it is not a requirement. It's an option. It's a tool that you can bring to the mix in terms of meeting our countywide housing goals. So I find that very intriguing.
Thank you. Other thoughts or comments? Mayor Huebner.
Yeah, I really appreciate, thank you, Chair. I appreciate Councilmember LaCava's comments, because what happens is that when market rate developers purchase something and then there are just a handful of affordables there, the comps in the whole area go up so much, and then it worsens the whole problem. So when One Paseo was open for business, our rents all went up because One Paseo's rents went up so high. And so, you know, we lost a lot of community members. So that's, I think I'll give this one 10 stars too.
Thank you, Mayor Huebner. Councilmember Chu.
Well, I'm a little concerned with this concept because, as we know, when the state came up with guidelines for RENA numbers for all of our cities and distributed them, one of the thoughts behind that was to kind of spread the affordable housing within the region so that it wouldn't be concentrated in certain cities. There's some cities in our region that have a very high number of RENA homes. They're able to reach the RENA numbers. Yet they still suffer from a lot of other sociological issues. And I fear that if they start marketing or using their RENA numbers, it may ultimately increase their sociological negative pressures and then become more of a problem. So I think that's my real concern when we start sharing RENA numbers. Yes, it is more of a challenge for very wealthy communities to deal with RENA. They may have to work at it more. It may obviously cost a lot more as well. But on the other hand, they may have more resources to assist those who may need low-income housing with other social services. So because of that, I think that's why the state used the formula that they did use throughout our region. So that's my real concern. I just want to go back in history when we had housing projects that the federal government funded and concentrated them in certain parts of communities. That's when we started creating ghettos. And I think we should be cognizant of that as we deal with that in our region.
Thank you. Mayor Huebner.
Yeah, I really appreciate what I think it's Vice Mayor Hsu is saying, and I struggle with this because we're a wealthy city, and I don't want to continue. I mean, we have high land values, and I don't want to continue to just see a bunch of rich people being able to live here. But there's some misconceptions about that. First of all, we have another challenge, and that is we have 5 vacant lots, and each of them is less than 1/2 acre. So it's going to be very difficult for us to meet our RHNA numbers, no matter what it is that we do. The other thing is that we have a lot of people who live here, came here, as teachers or retail workers or cocktail waitresses like I was. And so we're not a wealthy city. And we only have a $22 million general fund. We don't have tons of money. So there are misconceptions about small cities with high land values that I'd just like to bring to the fore, that, we don't have an overflowing coffer a couple cities do. Carlsbad comes to mind, but many of us small cities don't. We struggle balancing our budget and paying for all of the services. And so this is very difficult for us to meet. So at least there be some way that we could help if we can't build, all of our RHNA numbers.
My recollection from Napa is that, and I could have this wrong because remember we had formulas for using redevelopment money outside of redevelopment zones, but my recollection on Napa is it's 50% credit. So it's not a 1-for-1. And so it comes with some penalty. I think to Vice Mayor Hsu's point that we shouldn't allow everybody to trade their RHNA away without some consequences, but also recognition that sometimes it's important. And the county of Napa it's interesting. It's not the same, but it has some similar problems. Its problem is that so much of the land in the unincorporated county is hard to reach, right? It's up in the hills, it's down dirt roads, it doesn't have fire protection. And so the county chose to put more of their housing dollars literally into the city of Napa. So again, there's probably other regions, but it is worth at least just understanding both what's possible, what are the rules, and then how, to Vice Mayor Hsu's point, do the equity issues sort of get figured in there?
Is there any last comments or? Great. I think this is interesting. I think both Mayor Huebner and Vice Mayor Hsu have really good points, and I think it'd be super helpful to better understand how we could do something potentially along the lines of what they did in Napa that would both create flexibility for areas that are really constrained in terms of land availability, like Napa and Solana Beach, but also make sure that we really are foregrounding the equity concerns and not, increasing segregation in our communities, and that we're really ensuring that we are, investing in diversity, and that everyone that they're building communities that work for everyone, and not creating those kinds of sort of deeper segregation. So I would personally be really interested in an approach that took into account both of those needs with some flexibility for jurisdictions in a voluntary way to potentially do something around the RHNA credit share.
So I think we're doing well on time. I think, Jeff, we have 3 items left.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
Shall we continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so this next one, revenue and general obligation bonds broadly. The idea is that if we can secure any of the above revenue sources, or any revenue sources subsequent as well, we could bond off a portion of that revenue stream to just grow the pie, make it much larger. It's important to note that bond proceeds could only be used for capital projects and not for programmatic or administrative costs. So for instance, some of the work around research or technical assistance wouldn't be eligible for the bond proceeds, but it could be used for the actual production dollars of building affordable housing. The Bay Area, last we talked to them a few weeks ago, they had been kicking around the notion of a $10 billion bond issuance to support their workflow. And they were, last I heard, they were thinking of 2024. And just as a global comment, I think one of the things I think is really important is just keeping an eye on how other regions are considering their revenue options, at least order of magnitude. Because if the Bay Area is able to secure $10 billion and Los Angeles is able to secure $8 billion, that's really going to put San Diego be less competitive when it comes to securing state dollars for affordable housing. So that's just something we'll continue to keep an eye on and monitor what's happening in the region. So Jennifer?
Yep. There were basically no comments on this at all, and extremely strong support for it, as you can see from the polling results.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay, onward.
Okay, this next one should be pretty simple. State and federal funding. As I mentioned, the Bay Area already got a $20 million allocation last year, and they're requesting another $20 million this year. Los Angeles, there's legislation right now to create a regional housing finance agency. They're requesting $20 million this year as well. And I'm just noting here that there are, potential for federal programs. I know the Biden administration just put out their kind of thought paper on their housing package a few weeks ago, and includes this $1.75 billion Unlocking Possibilities grant program that's really aimed at local jurisdictions, local regions that are trying to think about creative ways to unlock affordable housing. So, opportunities like that could be leveraged as well.
And we didn't call this one out specifically for the work group because Jeff had sort of presented it in the recap, but we wanted to add it explicitly to the list. This one is not in the bill, Jeff, nor is the next one, which is philanthropy. So there weren't comments on this, but we just wanted to present it to you.
Great.
Okay, if no comments on that at all, then Jeff, again, we'll go to the final item, which again is not in the bill language, right? But this is just about us thinking about all of the tools we could have in our toolkit. So Jeff, go ahead.
Before you go forward, Jen, would it need to be in the bill language in order to enable us to make these partnerships, or is it just, yeah?
I'm not the expert. I think that, it's a good question to ask, and we should probably go vet it. But I think that a housing finance agency, it probably is allowed to pursue sources that aren't generated right from within the region. I think that the authorizing power is basically the power to raise sources within the region. But Jeff, we could get an attorney, I guess, to opine on and confirm that.
Yeah, and I think that there is language in the enabling legislation. There's a section called powers, and it includes accepting gifts, fees, grants, and other allocations from public and private entities. I'm reading it right now. That's literally the language. So I think that's probably sufficient.
Okay, perfect.
And that's, again, this is the language that the Bay Area, we borrowed from them. That this was the Bay Area's language, and it seems like it'd be sufficient.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so this last one is just thinking broadly and making sure we are not limited in our scope, and thinking creatively about how we can solve this shared challenge. And so philanthropic partnerships, both from foundations and philanthropy, but also we should, I guess, broaden out to important local institutions and stakeholders. Could be businesses and the big Qualcomms of San Diego. So ways we can leverage nonprofit business and philanthropic sector to work together to meet this shared goal. And some of the examples here: recently, the San Diego Foundation announced a partnership with the county $10 million to jumpstart affordable housing on public land. That's an example. In city of LA, they announced Atlanta, they announced the Houzz Atlanta initiative. This is really focused on the transit-oriented development. And it's $1 billion fund, 500 million from public, 500 million from private. It's being convened by Urban Land Institute and includes a number of local foundations that are now forming a funding collaborative. So that's another example of how we can really leverage some of the nonprofit and philanthropic institutions. And then Denver has done something similar over the last 10 years. They have a $50 million fund that's city, county, nonprofit. You could see Enterprise Community Partners and the Urban Land Conservancy. And they've funded 22 affordable housing projects totaling 2,100 units over the last decade.
There were no comments on this, and as you can see, extremely strong support.
Okay. Any thoughts from anyone on our board? Okay, onward.
That's it.
That's it.
It's 3:31. So, Chair, open to you and the committee members.
Yeah, no, first of all, I just really want to thank staff for this really extraordinary work. I mean, and especially all the work on getting so much feedback and input from the task force members, and as for a lot of the really creative thinking on different, revenue options. I think this is just so well done. So I just really want to appreciate the tremendous work that you all have put into this to bring this to where we are right now. So my understanding is our next steps is really just to have a discussion, provide any comments or thoughts or feedback that we feel like are really essential to be taken into account, because the next step here really is going to be at some point in the next month or so to be able to make sure that all of our feedback is being reflected in the legislation that's currently moving in Sacramento, and then be able to take this to the SANDAG board and ask for a formal endorsement of this legislation, as well as take this to our own cities and ask for our fellow, and for me at the county, right, to ask for our fellow representatives to support this work, because obviously it's all fine and good for us to have these conversations, but ultimately this is a bill that needs to pass in Sacramento. So with that in mind, are there any, big comments that we want to make sure are taken into account that can then be, incorporated in the draft legislation that's moving in Sacramento? And sorry, go ahead, Councilman.
I don't know if I missed it. I know last time there was some discussion about how the funds would be allocated. And I didn't know if there was, you'd reached consensus at the last meeting between regional and by jurisdiction.
We did not. I think that was another item that they're going to go back to the task force on. But there was a whole bunch of conversation about allocated in terms of which projects, which you saw the summary. And then the question was, would it be allocated 50-50 jurisdiction versus regionally, or some other formula? And then there's some conversation about what maybe it should be a flexible, instead of it being, decided at this point, maybe it would be something between some kind of flexible range instead of it being kind of predetermined. And that we have not addressed again.
Okay, cool. And then I thought I heard that 1105 might be going into the suspense file and what that means in terms of it moving forward.
I have not heard that. I don't know if anyone else.
I could take that one. My understanding when in working with Senator Hueso's office is that it moved into suspense basically because all bills that were found to have a fiscal impact of at least $50,000 automatically get moved into suspense. And this one, I mean, it's enabling legislation, so it's kind of debatable whether it would even hit that threshold. But I think the other previous bills around regional housing finance agencies moved to suspense. So just to be consistent, they moved ours to suspense. which really means that it's sitting with the Appropriations Committee now. And to move out of suspense, the Appropriations Committee chair will have to announce which bills move forward. And I think that's going to happen, if not by the end of this week, then sometime next week.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff.
Mayor Huebner.
Yeah, and just looking at this whole thing now, so the 50-50, 50% is cities and county, and the other 50 is the sort of regional approaches. So isn't the regional approaches thought that that's where we would be maybe doing a trade-off between RENA numbers and money? Or what else is there for the regional approach? What else would we be doing?
That was what we talked about last meeting. So I certainly can take that. You know, I think there's a lot of things that I would imagine we would be doing in the regional bucket, right? Which would be some of these strategic priorities, you know, looking at, you know, maybe investments in modular, or sort of some kind of more innovative housing construction opportunities that would be a little bit potentially too risky or too large scale for jurisdictions to tackle on their own, but would have regional benefits, or allocations for regional job centers. Or exactly what you just mentioned, which is that sort of trading. So the idea would be that there would be a lot of that there would be an opportunity or an ability to utilize the funds for regional strategic priorities and locations, in addition to being able to support jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Okay, I'd kind of be interested in hearing some more. So give me more. I don't know if we have the time, but like for the modular thing, like, so it has to be built somewhere. So then a jurisdiction would say, okay, build it here. And so all of our money, all of our city's monies would be going into building it there. And then is there always an automatic like RENA consideration in that?
So this was the conversation from last week, or 2 or 3 weeks ago, about the regional versus jurisdiction, and that would really be up to the board, right? So that the board would then be able to say, you know, the idea. Let me just sort of try this again. It is that half the money, if it was a 50-50 split, for example, would be formulaic, would just be on RENA numbers, and the other half, the board, the SD board, would have flexibility to decide how it was allocated based on, potentially could be formulaic if people decided to do so. Potentially it would not be if, you know, people decided, hey, we all think we want to build, you know, a lot of homes in, say, some strategic area that, you know, has a lot of spillover benefits. It could potentially be, you know, if it would talk about the modular idea, it could be, look, the investment in upstream modular production, and then those homes are built formulaically across the region. Or it could be that the board says, no, we want to do upstream modular investments and build in just one area. So the idea was to create half the money, which is formulaic, and, you know, just like according to RENA, and then the other half more flexible based on how the governing board saw prioritization should be at that time.
Okay, so it's per governing board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. They could decide to do it however or wherever, right? And that's the idea of it being regional, that they could decide our regional strategic priority is that we need more homes in, you know, coastal areas, so we're going to build more homes there. Or they might say our regional strategic priority is we want to build more homes in Sereno Valley because it's a job center. And so if you wanted to take, you know, climate goals into account, and, you know, you're looking at where transit's being built, they might, you know, maybe the future board in 10 years says Sereno Valley is the place we want to have more homes, or, you know, whatever that might look like, with the kind of notion that we don't know.
Right. Okay. Putting it all together. Thanks.
I think the other ways to look at it is who administers the funds. So the localities, that 50%, they would administer their funds. The other 50% regionally would administer it. But say the city of Solana Beach has a project of a really great, you know, mixed income project that's coming, and you don't have, you know, your city allocation wasn't enough to actually get it across the line. I think an important part of the regional fund is to say we can kick in another $3 million of subsidy to help make that project, a reality. And I think it's especially important in smaller cities to be able to have, get some of those important projects across the line.
Got it. Thanks.
And the only constraint, right, on the regional bucket is just allocating it in those categories: new construction, preservation, right, strategic initiatives. Yeah, that's your frame as the regional leadership board.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much.
Other questions or thoughts or things that we want to get clear? Because I think my understanding is that we have one more meeting to talk about governance. And other than that, hopefully we will have a cooked piece of transformative legislation that's going to do something useful for housing in Southern California. Councilmember Hsu.
Do we need to do anything in the meantime to help this bill pass on in terms of encouraging others to support it, whether it be other legislators in the Senate? Are there any focal points that a phone call or two may be helpful, or a letter?
Yes, I think yes. So I've been talking to Senator West's office, and they definitely need help. So I can kind of put together a little bit of a list of where things are at and where we might want to do some advocacy and circle back.
The Sandag Executive Board does occasionally pass resolutions in support of legislation, but the next one is coming up quickly. If you want to get on their agenda, I'm proposing something for them to support, but so you might as well. The next Executive Board meeting is June 10th.
I think we did already support it.
Did you already?
Yeah.
They already passed the resolution? Well, maybe
No.
they did.
No, we have to do. No, Councilmember Hsu is right. We just gave a brief because Chair Blakespear wanted to know what was going on. So I think Councilmember Hsu, you're right. We should plan to come back on the 10th and ask for a resolution. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and you might want to let Chair Blakespear know now.
Okay.
So, because that agenda is probably being written in the next week or two.
Councilmember Hsu, that is a really fantastic idea. I will work on it today. So thank you. I think that's a great plan. Thank you for that. Other thoughts? Well, I guess then we're pretty close to adjourned. I just want to say how excited I am. I mean, obviously we're not the ones in Sacramento who can take a vote on this. So I do think we're probably going to have to do some advocacy to move this forward and, and let them know how important this is for our region. But I think the idea of having a finance authority that could finance housing and actually, really do more than just mandates, but also create, incentives and really partner with cities who are trying to do their best and are really constrained, I think is really exciting. And I know affordable housing is just a huge crisis in our community. I think everyone agrees about housing affordability. And I am just so grateful of really the focused conversation and thoughtful leadership. I really like this idea of having subcommittees where people want to be on them. And so then they participate and pay attention and have lots of good ideas. So this is just such a thoughtful group of leaders. So thank you so much. Okay, before we're adjourned, we need to see if there's any public comments. Francesca?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any hands from the public.
Okay. With that, when is our next meeting, clerk? I think, yes, it's Thursday, June 2nd. Okay, great. Well, wonderful. Everyone, thank you for being on this journey together, and this meeting is adjourned.